I think it's a great segue to something you've said more recently, which is rule of 40 in software is kind of the gold standard for how people look at investing. You add something like agentic AI, maybe that takes it to rule of 50, 60, or even 70. Can you unpack what you mean by that and what that means for those who are investing in enterprise software?
Yeah, let me break that up into two separate statements. Okay, rule of 40 was a gold standard. I will argue we coined the phrase. I'm not going to get many arguments against that, is my guess. And for those of you in the audience, it's really a combination of EBITDA margin and growth rate. 25% EBITDA margin, 15% growth rate, great company, 40%, rule of 40. Gen AI enabled, before we get to agentic, is utilizing AI to make that rule of 40 more efficient. In enterprise software, 30% of our costs, in essence, are product development. Okay, so you think about the first instances of a Gen AI enabled product. It is a developer who now can operate 3 or 4 agents who can be as effective as 5 or 6 developers. So all of a sudden you go from, well, wait a minute, I was spending 30% of my cost on development. I can now spend 20% of my cost on development. More effective on new product and code writing than older. But, again, there's a tipping point dynamic that's going to occur in our marketplace where ultimately the Gen AI enabled or the Gen AI generated code will ultimately, supplant what was the legacy code. And so then you're going to see a massive shift in the cost dynamic. So now all of a sudden you're increasing your margin without selling one additional product because your cost of support, cost of development goes down. Point one, development. Customer support. As you think about utilizing these tools for customer support calls, 40, 50, 60, 70%, 80%, 90% deflection of these calls with agents, higher NPS scores, higher net promoter scores, higher customer service that you can do with fewer people. So now all of a sudden you're reducing your support cost. Go to market. Okay. If I talk to my CEOs, well, most of them, they're going to tell you that their salespeople spend 100% of their time selling. If you actually do the work, they're only spending 15% of their time selling. 85% of their time, it's the administration around selling, sales support, capturing information, putting it in some repository, using that to make a more effective sale and all those sort of things. Gen AI enabled agents can do a lot of that work. And so all of a sudden your salespeople now spend 40, 50, 60, 70% more time selling as opposed to the back office administration part of it. All those dynamics right there, I just lifted your margin from 25% EBITDA margin to 40% EBITDA margin. Okay, so now you go from rule of 40 to rule of 65. And now you say, okay, now how do I enhance my go-to-market part of this that I can actually be more effective in sales lead conversion? So now all of a sudden you're lifting your growth rate. Okay, now you're rule of 70, right? So that's a dynamic, which is what I call Gen AI enabled enterprise software. The second part is agentic, where you say, wow, I'm now actually able to develop agentic tools, agents that actually are delivering a completely different set of products, utility of those products, or actually addressable market, going to a different addressable market that actually has an exponential opportunity. What is that exponential opportunity? At a high level, it is AI-enabled software that now can go and displace services because you now have workers, which are agentic workers who do the things that an individual might do, and especially if you create them in an orchestration layer. Those are the important parts of how you move from rule of 40 to rule of 70 to agentic. And some agentic may not necessarily be or some rule of 70 may not be agentic in terms of their products, but you can still operate them at almost 2 times the EBITDA margin that you had them operating a year ago. That's what we're pivoting all our companies towards.